Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today we are reading from Alexander Pushkin, Selected Poetry, translated by Anthony Wood. Alexander Pushkin was born on May 26, 1799 in Moscow and died on January 29, 1837 as a result of being wounded in a duel 2 days earlier. Pushkin has been called the poet's poet and the people's poet of Russia. I asked the poet, scholar, translator, Russian-born Boris Dreyluk, would you tell me briefly why Pushkin is considered to be Russia's greatest writer? With his permission, here's Boris Dreyluk's answer. It's hard to be brief on the subject, but since Pushkin's own work embodied the Shakespearean dictum of brevity being the soul of wit, I'll try to live up to the same standard. First, to put it simply, Pushkin happened to be a man of enormous verbal gifts who was lucky enough to write at precisely the time when Russian began to blossom as a literary language. The possibility of writing and publishing text in Russian rather than Church Slavonic only opened about a century before Pushkin's birth. The literate population in the empire was extremely small throughout the 18th century, and many of those who were capable of writing verse or artful prose were not native speakers of Russian, but imported courtiers, academicians, and tutors from Europe. The rules of Russian versification were only worked out a few decades before Pushkin set pen to paper. The Russian literary landscape in the early 19th century was fertile and untrammeled, and Pushkin was one of a pleiad of young men and women who set about cultivating it. He was the most gifted and restless of these authors, and his masterpieces in each genre, from the versified folktale to the lyric, to the novel in verse, to the historical novel, set the pattern for all that was to follow. In other words, he was the best of the great pioneers, in the same way that Shakespeare was the best of the great Elizabethan pioneers. Russia was just a few centuries behind England and the other European nations, as it remains to this day. The magnificent actors in order of appearance are John Towey, Kay Weissman, Corinne Conley. Here's John Towey.
Thanks, Harry. The window. The lone moon picked the path from shadow. I sat alone and still. I saw a maid at her window. The breaths she drew were chill. She watched in fearful expectation the path below the hill. Then, here I am. I heard the whisper. With trembling hand, the maid, just as the moon was lost in darkness, opened the pane. I sighed. There's happiness. When will a window open for me one night? Next poem is called Chaideyev. He was a Russian philosopher. The falsities of love and hope, quiet glory are outworn. Those fantasies of childish scope have vanished, like the mists of dawn. But still we burn with fierce obsession. Impatience overflows our soul. Beneath the yoke of dire oppression, we hearken to our country's call. In faith and torment, we await the sacred moment of our freedom. As lovers, languishing, await the longed-for moment of their meeting. And while we burn for liberty and live for nobleness of mind, let us create our legacy from passion of the highest kind. My friend, believe. The star of wonder shall shine. the star of destiny. For Russian will awaken from slumber and grave our names, once she has risen upon the shards of despotism. The next one is called Two with no name. It's just an ellipsis, ... So we don't know who this is to. It comes to me again, that moment. You pass before my eyes, a fleeting vision of pure beauty, a spirit from the skies. In times of hopelessness and sadness, the busy world's great noise, long did I dream of those dear features and hear that gentle voice. The years went by. The storms dispersed the dreams of former days. And I forgot your gentle voice, forgot your heavenly face. I lived in darkness, incarceration. My days quite empty of divinity and inspiration, and tears, and life, and love. But now my soul awakes from slumber. Once more before my eyes, a fleeting vision of pure beauty, a spirit from the skies. And suddenly my heart beats faster. For once again, I have divinity and inspiration and life and tears and love. This is a short 6-line poem called Late Blooms I Find More Pleasing. That's the name of the poem. Late blooms I find more pleasing than any bright first flower. In us they awaken a sadness, livelier far. Livelier than sweet meeting can be the parting hour. This poem is titled Confession. I love you, though it makes me mad, despite my hopeless toil and shame, in folly and humility. Before you on my knees, I love you. It ill befits me and my years. It's time that I were wiser. I recognize all the signs. However, I am sick with love. Without you, I'm bored. I yawn. But when I see you, I'm sad. I must put up with it. My angel, I have to tell you how I love you. I hear the rustle of your dress, your light step from the sitting room, your voice of girlish innocence, and I completely lose my head. You smile. The world is joy for me. You turn from me, the world is sorrow. When I endure a day of torture, your hand, your pale hand, is my recompense. And when you lean at your embroidery with lurid eyes and locks, I gaze in rapture, tongue-tied as a child. Shall I describe my jealous torment when I observe your preparations to go out walking in the rain? The tears you shed in solitude? Your chats with someone who is not me? Or expeditions to Opaka? Or evenings at the pianoforte? Alina, take pity on me. I shall not dare to ask for love. Perhaps, my angel, for my sins, I am unworthy of your love. Only pretend. That glance of yours, it is so wonderfully expressive. Deceive me. It's not difficult. I'm glad to be deceived. Next one is called The Prophet. I wandered in a lonely place. My soul's great thirst tormented me. And at the crossing of the ways, a 6-winged seraph came to me. Like slumber, fingers light and wise, he laid upon my weary eyes, and like an eagle's in a maze, they opened with all-seeing gaze. My ears he touched, and noise and sound poured into them from all around. I heard the heavens in commotion, and angel hosts celestial flight, and sea beasts stirring in the ocean, and vines growth in the valley sides. And so my lips he bent, tore out my tongue, an idle sinful thing. With bloody hand in my numb mouth he placed a serpent's sapient tongue. And with his sword he clove my breast, and took my trembling heart entire. A coal, a light with brilliant fire, into my open breast he thrust. In that lonely place I lay as dead. And God's voice called to me and said, Prophet, arise, behold and hearken. Over the world by sea and land go, and fulfill my will unshaken. Burn with my word the heart of man. The next poem is called From Pindamonte, who is an 18th century Italian poet, a novelist. It's called From Pindamonte. His first name was Ippolito. I don't care for those resounding rights that take so many heads to dizzy heights. I won't complain and just admit the fact is the gods did not shape me for battling taxes or parleying with emperors at loggerheads. To me, it makes no difference whether blockheads are hoodwinked by an unrestricted press or censorship cramps wit to muted jest. All this, I have to say, is words, words, words. To rights of this kind, I've grown averse. Freedom of this kind is to me quite feeble. Allegiance to the sovereign or the people? Why should we care? To hell with it. By no one held to account, to serve oneself alone and please oneself and breathe without delivering one's conscience, thoughts, or neck to power or livery. To wander as one wishes, take one's fill of nature's beauty, perfect art, and thrill. There's happiness and rights. This last one is called Exegi Monumentum. I have made myself, but not with hands, a monument. The people's path to it will not be overgrown. My monument's indomitable summit rises higher than Alexander's column. Not all of me shall die, for in my cherished lyre, my soul shall outlive my dust. It shall escape decay. In the sublunary world, my fame shall be unending as long as a single poet holds sway. And word of me shall spread through all the Russian land. My name shall be pronounced in all its living tongues by the proud Slav, the Finn, the Kunmuk of the steppes, and the unbiddable Tungus. Long there be a place for me in people's hearts, because my lyre awoke warm-hearted sentiments. Because in my harsh age, I sang of liberty and asked for the fallen lenience. O my muse, pay all respect to the divine, to praise and calumny in equal share, be cool, have no fear of insult, seek no laurel crown, and do not argue with a fool.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
This is called Elegy. The madcap years have long since gone to waste. They hang upon me like a drunken haze. Meanwhile, inside me, sadness from the past grows in strength, like wine, with lengthening days. The course that I must take will offer me troubles and toils and a tormented sea. But I have no desire, dear friends, to die. I wish to live, to suffer, and to think. I know that griefs and cares will burden me, But pleasures also life will surely bring. I shall again drink in sweet harmony. The mind's creations will not cease to ring. And on my sad decline, perhaps one day, love's farewell smile will shine. This is called Autumn, a fragment. It is autumn. It is October. And the lingering leaves are disappearing from the naked branches. The road is glazed. The cold of autumn breathes. The mill stream still sounds loudly as it passes. But now the pond is hard. Out in the fields, my neighbor urges on his canine forces. The frenzied sport disturbs the winter crops, and sleeping groves are roused by baying dogs. This is my season. Spring is quite the worst. I hate the thaw. It makes me ill. Stench, mire. My blood ferments. My spirit is oppressed. The sternness of midwinter I prefer. How I love its snow, when free and fast the sled speeds on beneath the evening star, when she beside you gives your hand a squeeze, warm beneath fur, fresh, trembling and ablaze. And how uplifting, shod in fine sharp steel, to glide on crystal rivers far from shore. The sparkle of a winter festival. But snow, when it has fallen half the year, inevitably loses its appeal, even for the deep burrower, the bear. One can't forever ride with young Armidas or mope by stoves in front of double windows. Beautiful summer. You I should love best, but for your dust and flies and scorching heat. You torture us, destroy our faculties. Like earth, we suffer drought. Our only thought is, how can we satisfy our raging thirst? The passing of Dame Winter we regret. We saw her off with fruit liqueur and blinis, and now we feed her with ice cream and ice. Late autumn is continually berated. That sentiment, dear reader, isn't mine. I love it for its quietly glowing beauty, as to a child unloved by its own kin. I am distinctly drawn to it. Yes, autumn, of all the seasons, it's my favorite one. I am no vainglorious lover. Truth to tell, my love of it has something whimsical. How can I explain? It has for me something of the quality you'll find in a consumptive girl condemned to die. Meekly the poor thing wanes without complaint. On her thin lips a smile is visible. She has no notion of the yawning ground, her wasted face suffused with hectic tone. Alive today, tomorrow she is gone. Season of melancholy, eyes enchant her. How pleasing to me are your farewell hues. I love the finery of fading nature, the trees arrayed in gold and crimson dress, the fresh wind soughing through the lofty verdure, the dense and darkly undulating skies, the sun's infrequent ray, the early frost, and grizzled winter's lightly murmured threats. Every year, when autumn comes, I flourish. The Russian cold brings tonic to my being. In acts of daily life, I take new relish, so that sleep duly comes and duly hunger. The blood runs through my heart in pleasant rush. Desires seethe, I am happy again, and young, and full of life. Such is my organism, if you'll forgive a vulgar prosean. My mount is brought over the open heath. It bears its rider on with flying mane. The ice breaks up beneath each flashing hoof. The frozen valley rings with solid sound. The brief day fades. In the forgotten hearth, a fire is burning once again. In turn, it leaps, dies down. In front of it, I read or lose myself in lengthy spells of thought. And I forget the world. And in sweet peace, soon I am sweetly lulled by imagination. With no preamble, poetry appears, and my soul is caught in lyrical commotion. It trembles, sounds, and seeks as if in dream to overflow in unrestrained expression. Here comes an unseen multitude of guests, visitors from oblivion, fancy's fruits. Into my mind, ambitious thoughts come swarming, and rhymes race out to meet them on the way. My fingers ask for a pen, the pen for paper, and in a moment verses freely flow. So a ship sleeps immobile in still water. But look, the sailors scramble forward. High and low they climb, and wind fills out the sails. The giant moves, and soon she cuts the waves. She sails. But where are we to sail? It's time, my love. It's time. It's time, my love. It's time. The heart seeks peace. Day chases day. The hours and minutes seize fragments of our existence. You and I make plans for life. And suddenly, we die. There is no happiness on earth, but freedom and peace there are. Long have I dreamt of Eden, a weary slave, long meditated flight to some far realm of work and pure delight. I see again the corner of the earth where 2 years passed quietly of my banishment. 10 years gone by since then, and much has changed for me. And in accordance with the general law has changed in me. But here I am again. The past enfolds me in its strong embrace, and it seems only yesterday I roamed these groves. Here is the place of my disgrace, the house I lived in with my poor old nanny. She is no more. And from behind the wall, no longer do I hear her heavy step as watchfully she'd go about her round. Here is the wooded hillock at whose crest I would sit motionless and contemplate the lake, how often thinking sorrowfully of other shores and other waters. This shining stretch of blue encircling it, golden fields and lush green pastures. Slowly over its virgin deeps, a fisherman drags his threadbare net. About its banks lie scattered villages, and there behind them, crookedly, a windmill stands. Its sails are scarcely turning. At the furthest border of this ancestral land, just where the road, churned up by rains, begins its uphill course, 3 pine trees stand, one on its own, the others close by each other, past the spot I'd ride between the moon. The soughing from their summits would always greet me. Now, once more I pass them at that same hour, and there before my eyes, those trees, again, they are unchanged to me. That soughing so familiar to my ear, but all around the silent roots of two, where all was bare before. Now, a new grove has sprouted up, a green young family like children. Still their grim companion stands alone like some old bachelor, while all around him is bare as it has always been. Welcome, newcomers to the family. Never, though, shall I be here to see your mighty height. When you've outgrown my old acquaintances and hide away their crowns from passing eyes. But may my grandson hear your sound of greeting and riding by night with pleasant thoughts after enjoying genial company. May he remember me. This is my last one. The ready power of suffering. The ready power of suffering, the heart, I thought had lost those days long since over. I said, the past is past. Gone are the joys and heartaches, the make-believe and dream. But now, I feel them stirring, for beauty rules supreme.
That was lovely. I'm going to read Alexander Pushkin's The Bronze Horseman. Preface. The event described in this tale is based on fact. Details of the flood are taken from journals of the time. Prologue. Beside the watery waste he stood, and gave himself to lofty thought. Before his far-fixed gaze, the river vastly stretched. A humble boat strove on it in lone endeavor. Against each mossy, marshy bank, here and there, low huts showed black. The shelters of the wretched thin. The ancient forest, dark and dank, perpetual stranger to the sun, sounded around. He pondered well. From here we shall chastise the Swede. Here we shall raise a citadel. Our haughty neighbor shall take heed. Here we have been ordained to hew a window on to Europe. New shall be our hold upon the sea. Through unknown waters, every state shall send its ships to us to trade, and we shall toast the open sea. A century passed. Out of the forest, out of the marshy waste, the fort grew to a city of the fairest, jewel and wonder of the north. Where once the Finnish fisherman, neglected foster son of nature, standing on the low-lying bank, cast upon the nameless water his time-worn sweep scene. Now along the teeming banks, in stately masses, harmonious rows of towers and palaces greet the nation ships that throng from every corner of the earth for moorings at the quays of wealth. The Neva is arrayed in granite. Bridges overhang its waters. The art of skillful cultivators has clad in green the isles that span it. Before the younger capital, old Moscow loses all her luster. like the dowager in purple before the newly crowned Tsaritsa. I love you, Peter's grand creation. I love your stern and stately face, that never in majestic motion, its stretching shoreline's granite grace, and railings of ornate cast iron. I love your meditative night and moonless gleam, so bright that I can read and write without a light. The streets with not a soul in sight, the slumbering mass of every building, the brilliant Admiralty spire, clear to the eye, and not admitting darkness to the golden sky. One twilight hurries to relieve another, allowing night a mere half hour. I love your winter's stubborn winter, your motionless sharp air and frost, the sledges running on the river, girls' faces brighter than the rose, the glitter and the din of balls, the goblets overflowing foam when the carousing hour falls, and the punches pale blue flame. I love the warlike animation upon the playing field of Mars, the ranks of infantry and horse meticulously in formation, the colors swaying in harmony, tattered from their victory, the glint of bronzen helmets hold in battles recent and of old. I love, O martial capital, the thunder of your citadel when the Empress of the North gives the imperial house a son, or one more victory is won, or when the Neva carries off its cracked blue ice towards the sea, scenting the coming spring in glee. Peter's glorious city, stand unyielding as the Russian land. Let the conquered element find respite with you in the end. Let the Finnish waters curb their profitless hostility, their age-old malice not disturb Peter through all eternity. A time of rare catastrophe is vivid in the memory still, and it is what, my friends, shall give the matter of my narrative. Sad is the tale I have to tell. Part 1. Over murky Petrograd breathed a November, cold and hard. With thunderous waves, the river Neva struck against its stately railings, cast about its restless flailings like someone in a raging fever. It was late and it was dark. The rain beat down, became berserk. The wind set up a dismal whine. Our youthful hero chose this time to visit friends and then come home. Yevgeny, we shall have his name. It has a pleasant sound. Besides, my pen first knew it long ago. His family name we need not know, although it may be one that rides high in the annals of our land, thanks to the pen of Karamzin. Now it has sunk to mere has-been, forgotten by both low and grand. Our hero does some kind of work, lives in Kolomna, shuns the great, and in his mind no memories lurk of bygone days or of the dead. And so, late, coming home, Yevgeny threw off his coat and went to bed. But long he lay awake, for many and rousing thoughts ran through his head. That he was poor, that only work could bring him independence, honor. If only God would one day make him sharper-witted, earn more money. There was some well-fed, bone-lazy, not clever. Their life was so easy. While it was 2 years altogether that he had labored. What foul weather, he thought too. It had not abated. With such a swiftly rising river, they'd take the bridges off the Neva. And so he might be separated from his parasha for, who knew, longer than a day or two. Yevgeny, with a heartfelt sigh, turns to poetic reverie. Get married? Well, why not? He'll see. It'll be hard, he'll not deny. However, he is young and strong. There's nothing he'll refuse to try. It certainly won't take him long. He'll make a simple home one day, and with Parasha as his wife, he will enjoy a peaceful life. A year, and I'll be on my way. I'll have a post. Parasha, she to take charge of household matters, see to the children's upbringing. And so, until the grave lays claim to us, hand in hand through life we'll go. Our grandchildren will bury us. Thus he mused. And he was sad that night. He wished the angry rain would beat less madly on the pane. The wailing of the wind would fade. He closed his sleepy eyes at last. The next he knew, the stormy night had ended. Came pale dawn. Aghast, he saw the day. With all its might, the river Neva all night long had strained towards the open sea, against its savage adversary, to prove, though in the end, less strong. Now people gathered all along the riverside to watch the night's aftermath, the foaming heights. The sea winds blowing up the Gulf had checked the Neva's flow. It reared, forced backwards in a mighty huff, and all the islands disappeared. Soon the weather grew still worse. The angry Neva roared and swelled, and like a cauldron seethed and swirled, as if a captive beast let loose fell on the city. Before it the people flee, soon none to see, and now the waters suddenly gush into cellars underground. Canals and hidden sluices sound. Behold Metropolis like Triton appearing waist deep to Poseidon. Siege! Assault! Malicious waves swarm over windowsills like thieves. Sterns of loose careering boats smash through the panes. Soaked street stallboards, pieces of houses, roofs and balks, bundles adrift from warehouse stocks, the worldly goods of poverty, coffins from a cemetery, parts of bridges, helter-skelter down the streets. The people see God's anger and the penalty. Nothing is left now. Food and shelter, where have they gone? At this dark time, the late Tsar ruled with glory still. Out on the balcony he came, and troubled spoke. It is God's will, the elements no Tsar can rule. In gloomy thought he sat. His eye was fixed upon calamity, each mighty square a rising pool into which new rivers streamed. Amongst it all, the palace seemed a hapless islet. But the Tsar, through the perils of the flood, through the city far and near, in due course sent his generals out to save the helpless from the foam, or else from drowning in their home. And on that day, on Peter's Square, Upon an elevated porch, pride of a new-built mansion, where a pair of marble lions stood watch, each with raised paw, as if alive. Without a hat, arms crossed, astride one of these, poor Yevgeny sat, fearfully pale, but not afraid on his account. He did not hear the greedy waves advancing near, feel on his face the rain that lashed, the squall that had removed his hat. He did not feel his soles being splashed. His desperate gaze was firmly set upon a single spot. And there, like mountain summits, jet on jet, the furious waters clove the air. The howling center of the storm, spewing debris in every form. Out where, oh God, it was most rough, very nearly on the gulf. A fence, unpainted, and a willow, a time-worn little house, a widow there with Parasha, with his dream. Or was this really all a dream? Can all our life be nothing worth, a trick that heaven plays on earth? Bewitched he sat, as if in fable, as if he too were made of marble, immobile. And on every quarter all he sees is water, water. And high above the invaded land, above the raging of the flood, with back to him, an outstretched hand in overmastering command, the bronzen mounted idol stood. Part 2. But now, well wearied with destruction, the never rests its sated maw, and having relished insurrection, begins to settle down once more, dropping its prey. A band of robbers thus takes a village, slashes, clobbers, smashes, wrecks, and seizes, howls, violence, terror, oaths, and wails. The robbers tire. Weighed down by spoils, they fear pursuit and disappear, with booty scattered in the rear. The waters fell. The thoroughfares opened again. Yevgeny hastened, clinging to hope, but full of fears, towards the river, scarcely chastened, filled with the flush of victory. The waves still boiled maliciously, as if on top of smoldering fires, capped still with foam from shore to shore. The never breathed with heavy sighs, spent as a speed returned from war. Yevgeny looks about. He spies a boat. At once his spirits rise. He hails a horseman, heaven sent. The boatman names a modest fee and launches off audaciously into the fearsome element. The oarsman, skilled through many a year, struggles with the turbulence, and he is ready more than once with daring strokes to disappear between the billows deep and sheer. At last he makes the shore. Poor soul, down the street Yevgeny hastens, seeking out familiar places, but recognizing none at all. Dreadful sight. The street is shattered. Everything is strewn and battered. The houses stand there crooked. Many collapsed. Some vanished, unconcealed. As upon a battlefield, bodies lie all around. Yevgeny, tormented, trembling in his shoes, utterly oblivious, still hurries headlong to the place where fate awaits him with its news, like an unopened letter. Here, The settlement, the Gulf. He's near the house. But what is this? He stops, and back he turns, retraces steps. He looks, walks on, another look. Here's where it was, the little nook, and there's the willow. But the gate, has it been torn off in the spate? And where's the house? In deepest slough, round and round he walks and walks, and loudly to himself he talks. Suddenly he strikes his brow and laughs out loud. Darkness lies deep upon a city all in fear. Its people do not try to sleep. The talk is ceaseless everywhere of what has come to pass that day. From tired pale clouds, the morning ray shone on the silent capital and found no traces of disaster. The ill work crimson covered, all was as before. The streets now free saw no concern or sympathy. Clerks, work-bound, left their night's abode. The intrepid trader, undismayed, opened his cellar, robbed by flood, hoping to win back losses made from fellow traders. Many a boat appeared from courtyards. Count Khvostov, poet, beloved of heaven above, began to sing in timeless verse the Neva settlement's distress. But my poor Yevgeny, he, troubled, alas, in heart and mind, could not withstand catastrophe. The fury of the waves and wind roared in his ears. He roamed aghast, consumed by wordless thoughts of doom. He was bedeviled by a dream. Days, and soon a week went past, a month, and he did not go home. His term was up. The landlord let the empty niche to some poor poet. Yet Jenny did not come to fetch his few belongings there. Poor wretch, an alien to society. He went about all day on foot and slept upon the embankment. Food was offered him in charity on window sills. His tattered clothing rotted away on him. With loathing, children peddled him with pebbles. The coach's whip often would find him. He never looked ahead, behind him, deaf with the din of inner troubles. And so his miserable span was dragged out. Neither beast nor man, not an inhabitant of earth, and not a phantom from the dead, not one and not the other. Birth. One night he found to lay his head above the Neva. Autumn breathed its wind. Frustrated waters seethed against the embankment, beat its steps like a petitioner who raps despairingly upon the door of deaf officials of the law. Rain began. Yevgeny woke. Wind howled, and in the distant dark, a sentinel exchanged his call with it. He started to recall the horror that had passed. He rose and quickly walked about and froze. It was as if his end was nigh. He stood beneath the columned arch of that great mansion. On the porch, a pair of marble lions on watch, each with raised paw as if alive. And on the palisaded rock, the bronzen idol, hand held high, rode above him in the dark. Yevgeny trembled. In his mind, all was dreadfully defined. How could he not recognize where he had seen the grim waves spill, the waters in rebellion rise, the lions the square, while stark and still, he whose indomitable will had raised a city from the sea, towered in bronze above it, he, fearsome from the gloom below. What thoughts are pressing on that brow? Within him, what unbounded force? What fire comes flashing from that horse? Where, proud stallion, are you bound? Where will your hooves put down to ground? Destiny's great lord and master, was it not exactly thus your iron bridle reared up Russia upon the brink of the abyss? Around the idol's pedestal, the madman began to pace. His poor wild eyes saw face to face the ruler over half the world. His chest was tight. He pressed his brow against cold railings. Fire ran through his heart. His blood was boiling over. His gaze was visionless in mist. Before the mighty image, somber he stood, and clenching teeth and fist, as if possessed by some dark power. Miracle builder, now, he hissed. Just you wait, the awesome czar, it seemed, had slowly turned his head. In mounting rage begun to glare. Headlong across the empty square, he ran. Behind him as he fled, like rumbling thunder, hooves resounding upon the shaken thoroughfare. And all night long, astride his bounding steed, the horseman, hand held high, outstretched beneath the moonlit sky, followed Yevgeny. And no matter whither the poor madman bent his steps, with heavy, echoing clatter, after him the horseman went. Whenever next he chanced to pass that square, he would be overtaken by inner turmoil. He would press his heart as if to ease its aching, take off his threadbare cap. His gaze he could not bring himself to raise. He kept his distance. Off the shore, a tiny islet can be seen. There a fisherman will moor, out fishing late, bring in his seine and cook his meager supper. Or a clerk will of a Sunday row to that place where no blade will grow. The flood had borne there in its sport a time-worn little house. Above the waves like some black bush it stood. Last spring, a wherry took it off, empty and ruined. They discovered my madman on its threshold. There upon that spot, his corpse was covered and was committed to God's care.
Corinne, that was just a majestic reader. It was transfixing, and John and Kay, your readings were marvelous of the lyrics and the elegies. Some of the themes, as I'm sure you noticed, are love, death, exile, the individual, the power of the state over the individual, beauty, suffering, and it's just been a marvelous reading. We have a few minutes left, Kay and Corinne. Corinne, since you just finished this marvelous reading, I mean, what an epical reading. I use that word majestic. It's true. You just, you just transfixed us. And what would you like to say? And then when you get through, what would Kay like to say about the poetry and the reading?
Well, I'm glad they started out rather lighthearted. I was, because both Kay and John had poems that, were quite light and fanciful and talked of love and all those nice, pretty things. So it was, this was a bit, it was in a heavy part of history, I guess you'd say.
Kay?
Well, I am just in awe of Corinne. I can't get over her. It was magnificent,
Oh, my goodness.
and I found it difficult for me. This was the most difficult poet for me. I couldn't seem to get my words out, you know. So I need to practice reading Pushkin.
Oh, I thought I thought the poem, I liked the lightness of it. I mean, I was surprised, having been working on this,
That it was light, yeah.
Yeah, that it, you know, it seemed
Yeah,
quite lighthearted and lovely, you know. All those things that we like in poetry.
well, it's not easy.
We're fabulous, Kay. You know, you read poems of love, of suffering, of, you know, Autumn. That was a lovely poem you read. You did a fabulous job.
Thank you.
I know Pushkin's great, but you both, and so did John, just really got in, and you always bring the poetry to life right before our eyes. You know, there's just, you know, I mean, Corinne's poem, right? It starts out with a, you know, love toward the Saint, you know, Peter, the Tsar, and then toward the building of that city, St. Petersburg. It's a symbol, the bronze horseman. And then at the end, you know, you see the destructive qualities too. You know, Pushkin, he loved Peter, but he also saw the destructiveness in the leader, and he always stood up for the people and the individual. But he was so great with words, wasn't he? And so many, such a range.
Yeah.
Magnificent.
Is that bronze statue still there? Does anyone know? I mean,
Well,
we
I
have
haven't been
pictures
there,
of
so
it.
I couldn't speak first experience, but I guess that's a good question. We'll have to check it out. But thank you both, John Towey, Kay Weissman, and Corinne Conley, for just such a majestic reading. It was just, you know, one of your best. And so thank you. And next Tuesday, we have two marvelous poets with us, Gail Ronsky and Gail Newman.